Real fast, just want to open up to today. We filed some bills on local EDCs and TDCs. In essence, the same exact accountability that we have imposed on ourselves, we now impose on in the legislation for local EDCs and TDCs. You've all read a lot of the local stories of lack of transparency and gross spending on their part. Hopefully this will rein them in and get to the point where they'll function and do those things that are great and help with what we're trying to accomplish both at the state and the local level. In addition to that, a lot of the controversy is centered around hiding behind language of trade secrets. Chairman Caldwell's here today. He's going to talk about a public records exemption, which basically will say if you spend 1 penny of taxpayer dollar, you don't have that trade secret exemption. And finally, we filed a lawsuit today against the City of Tampa. Copies is available for you guys, that basically seeks to have the court stop them from issuing an illegal tax, and we can talk about that after. So first, I'll start with Chairman Grant. I might have promoted you there a little bit.
Thank you for the promotion. And you got my name right too. I'm not Jamie. Thank you. Thank you all for coming here today. Proud to be presenting a bill before the Florida legislature dealing with accountability and transparency regarding economic development organizations and tourist development organizations. You all have done a terrific job in the past of uncovering what I would call is pretty bad practices for some of those agencies in the past. We appreciate you doing that, which is one of the reasons why we have the legislation. I'll just open it up for any questions that you might have. That was easy. Go ahead.
If you could just go in terms of now you passed transparency stuff last year.
At the state level, correct.
At the state level, but it was there was differences between what you first proposed and then what was ultimately passed in the special session. I'm just trying to understand which one is it modeled after, the one that you guys started with or the one you finished?
The one we started with.
Okay. So that's actually a stricter standard
correct.
Than you had that final bill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so, like, what's the line on, like, I think for Visit Florida, the contracts, anything over $750,000 has to be legislatively approved. Is that something like that? At
the local level, anything over $250,000 has to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Any contract over $5,000 has to be published on the local website.
What are some of the problems you're seeing? Is it just unique to Tampa, or are you finding that this is an issue?
No, thank you. I guess tell you that it's statewide. We have seen these problems in Orlando, Orange County, Jacksonville, Broward County, Tampa, Pinellas, Okaloosa. So it's not that it's an isolated incident that we could just wish away and hopefully it'll get better at the local level. It's something that seems to be endemic. The more money, I mean, we're talking about $1 billion, almost $1 billion in bed tax money, and obviously when you get that much money floating around the system, there's going to be some abuses, and that's what we're trying to curb.
I think earlier this year, the House had put out a request to some of these local CDCs. I think there was even a subsequent request in July, asking them to provide specific details of how they're spending this money. More than the one sheets that I think they might have provided at times. Have you heard anything from folks like, I know Visit Orlando hasn't given them much, what about Greater Miami?
I haven't heard about Greater Miami, whether they have or they haven't, to be quite honest with you. Going forward, they will be required to put that information on a website so that everybody in the jurisdiction or in the state will have availability to look at it and make sure that it is transparent and above board.
But they've ignored 2 public records requests from my newspaper.
Is this to a degree an acknowledgement that the bill you passed last year does not affect local governments as strictly as you thought it did?
I would say that's probably correct.
What about with the Visit Florida and the destination marketing organizations that also there's been a question raised of their participation and how much transparency they're required?
And that's what this bill seeks to address.
It does as well.
Yes.
And so it's a bit of an acknowledgement there that maybe those destination marketing organizations.
The local ones, yes. Yes.
Correct issue?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's part of the reporting that you all have done over the past few years, have spotlighted some of those issues, which is, you know, one of the reasons why we're bringing it in front of the legislature to try to correct those abuses.
But their position that maybe they don't have to reveal as much.
If they're spending taxpayers' dollars, then they need to reveal what they're doing. It's as simple as that. It's all our money, and we should know how that money is being spent.
Do you know if the bill as written would apply retroactively? So in other words, if Visit Orlando has contracts that it's not giving out right now, would this apply, you know, after the effective date, or would it apply to contracts that it's not actively giving out?
You know, that's a good point. Maybe we'll include that in the bill. All those contracts should be forthcoming, and they should be transparent. They should be available to the public to read. And if there are conflicts of interest, then those should be addressed internally to make sure that there's not abuse going forward. Anybody else? Thank you all.
So in that same vein, we have had different agencies and entities who have tried to claim that their contractual agreements, their vendor contracts, fall under the trade secret exemption law. And parallel with that, always in the interest of trying to make things simpler and more direct, we have Representative Massullo has filed today 2 bills. The first one would repeal what is roughly 75 different variant definitions of trade secret, and a second bill that would simply clarify that the definition of trade secret is the one that you find in Chapter 688.002. Essentially, the things that we all classically understand as trade secrets, the formula for Coca-Cola, the recipe for KFC chicken, and the bill then goes on to state, and in case you're confused, essentially, it does not include contractual agreements between public entities and the private sector. Those would not qualify as trade secrets, and you cannot claim that in order to prevent their disclosure. Questions?
Can you,
Go ahead, Ralph.
can you talk about whether you think this should apply to the chemicals related to fracking? They have used the trade secret exemption to not make that available to the public.
Yeah, as you'll recall, we have, I think, 4 years in a row ran a bill and passed out of the House that would have addressed that issue. All chemicals used for any kind of non-traditional extraction would have to be disclosed to the Department of Environmental Protection, and the DEP would be the one to evaluate whether it met the definition of trade secret. It would not be up to the commercial entity to claim that.
But would this bill now apply to that? Because that bill never passed, so should this bill now apply to those industries?
Well, I think as we indicated in all those efforts to pass that bill, the oil and gas statutes really don't contemplate non-traditional extraction in any way whatsoever. So this is a gray area that we continue, and I continue to believe we ought to address, but we've been unable to get our partners in the Senate to agree on that over the time. So
one issue that has come up in trade secrets is State Farm has basically used the trade secret definition to refuse to disclose, well, they've disclosed it to the state, but they won't let the state make public their policy counts. And basically the Office of Insurance Regulation has maintained that they're still asking other people to keep turning over that information, but State Farm has successfully defended this position in court. Do you know whether or not your legislation would address this issue related to trade secrets in terms of insurers?
well, that's an excellent question. I haven't thought about that permutation, but I'll be glad to take a look at it. Thank you very much, Gary. Yeah.
Similar vein, trade secrets have been used politically as well to try to blunt disclosure of some documents in redistricting, for example. Would this bill be broad enough to cover those kind of lines as well? Political documents.
No, anything that's a public record and meets the traditional definition of public record should be made public. And again, this would repeal the variant permutation definitions. Again, 75 roughly different variations that are in the statute now, and focus solely on that you find in the trade secret statute currently.
But for all areas, in other words. All areas.
It's very broad.
What was the catalyst for this if it wasn't fracking? Obviously, there was a Pitbull contract, a mystery contract.
Yeah, it's entities claiming that the contracts qualify as trade secrets, and I don't think I think all of us saw that as an affront to that, and really led to a discussion about how people try to use the trade secret law to shield those type of activities, and then looking and finding that we have all these various definitions. Why don't we just focus on a single definition that covers the territory? Yes, sir.
Would this do anything about the, I believe there are criminal penalties, right, for disclosure of trade secrets?
Mm-hmm.
Often state agencies are very reluctant to, or very deferential to companies that claim trade secrets because they're afraid of criminal penalties that are much stronger than failure to disclose public documents. Does this do anything to ameliorate that issue?
Yeah, I don't believe that we've changed any of the criminal penalties, but again, I think it reflects the House's commitment to be open and transparent and shrink the universe of claims down to what is a legitimate trade secret or legitimate business practice that's unique and different and requiring of protection for their ability to be successful.
I know you might not be able to get into all the permutations, but if I could give you two other examples that have come up in the last 2 years outside of Pitbull, whether or not you think this would address this. One issue was an issue that you all are engaged in litigation involving the contract between the lottery and the vendor. Basically, the lottery redacted portions of the contract that it signed by saying, well, this would reveal, business practices of our vendor, and so therefore they redacted chunks of the contract when it was asked for on a public record. Curious if it applies to that. And then the other one was the issue came up with the Seminole Tribe when it was dealing with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, and they claimed they used trade secret to refuse to give a deposition that they did with a Seminole Tribe official because he revealed how much money the Seminoles were making. And it was in a deposition in a lawsuit between the Seminoles and the state, yet the state took the position that, well, the Seminoles say it's a trade secret, so we're not supposed to release it.
Yeah, I think in the first instance, it's very clear what the House position is regarding the vendor relationship with the lottery. In the second position, I'm not intimately familiar with the circumstance, but I think that's a little different. That's a deposition arrangement versus what we're talking about, vendor contracts that are being hidden from public disclosure.
And I hope I'm not going, what about this, what about that, but given the discussion we just had with the local entities, I mean, and how far you guys are going down to the EDCs and TDCs, I'm assuming this would, these two bills in conjunction would apply to them too. So, they couldn't say, whatever entity we have a marketing thing with has a trade secret.
Absolutely. The first bill that Representative Grant presented deals specifically with local TDCs and EDCs. What we're talking about here is changing general law to apply to every circumstance, and certainly I'm a believer that we'll find new circumstances that we haven't even considered yet, but that's really our purpose. Is you've got 75 roughly different variations on a theme. What does that really benefit except folks' ability to try to avoid public disclosure? And so narrowing this down to a single definition that's easily understood, at least we believe so, and provides the greatest opportunity for transparency. All right. Yeah.
This might be the tax money these TDCs are bringing in, how much money they're actually, I know I saw one article that said like $585 billion for Visit Orlando.
I'm going to punt that back to the speaker here.
I just want to say a couple of additional points to both Representative Grant and Chairman Caldwell's. Last year, what we did with the EDCs, TDCs, on the state level, that was why you saw like those 12 or 13 of them saying we're opting out, because if they're marketing partners, our statute did apply to them. That's why they were saying we're opting out. So then we sent them letters saying even opting out, we believe that those accountability provisions apply to you. What we're trying to do now is make it clear to the world that they do. We still believe that. I don't want you to think for one second that's why we've been fighting with them for the last 12 months. Also, what we did with the trade secrets, which I think is neat, and so a lot of the questions that Chairman Caldwell was just answering, is what we say to those vendors, if they want to utilize, in all those scenarios that I heard you ask, you want to utilize the trade secret exemption, what we do is we create a process in the legislation, and it's filed and you can read it, but we create a process now for you to go to a circuit court and have the court take it out of the agency's hand, have the court determine it is a trade secret and it's protected or not. So hopefully a lot of that stuff will get resolved. And I do want to say that the impetus behind it, though, just understand our impetus was this, is that if you spend $1 of taxpayer money, $1, then you don't have a trade secret. At the same time, we want to respect businesses that do engage, and we want the best businesses and the best companies to come and engage with the state of Florida for whatever those contracts might be. So we're not getting in the business of getting into line by line what the company does, how they spend their money. Those are legitimate business things that should probably be protected, and arguably, and the circuit court would say those are protectable. But to the extent that you have a contract and you're getting $1 of taxpayer money, we want that to be completely and open to the public. And they have a choice. They don't have to do business with. They don't have to do business with the state. If that's so burdensome to them, then don't do business with the state. We'll have no shortage of vendors who will come and play by the open and transparent rules.
I would like to focus real quickly on what you just described in terms of that process that you're talking about, because there are similar processes that will affect in other states. Are you suggesting, however, that news organizations and reporters will be the named defendants in case if they pursue a public records request?
No, you go to the agency, you ask for a public, you ask for a document. They say it's a trade secret claimed by the vendor. That vendor, not you, the vendor goes to the circuit court to determine whether or not that is a trade secret, and the circuit court will rule. And we'll hone the process, Gary. But there's no
I'm just trying to find out if these organizations are going to have to be the defendants.
after they've claimed it as a trade secret.
Okay, so it's only once it's challenged. So the agency can just.
No, someone goes. There's no challenge. Someone goes, asks for a document. At some point, they are informed, they get part of a document. At some point, they're informed that that document is this portion or the whole thing is asserted as a trade secret. We now put the burden. You want to have that claim that it's a trade secret, vendor. That vendor has to go to a circuit court and have the circuit court determine that the thing that was asked for is a trade secret.
So in other words, the agency would say, we are releasing it unless
This takes the agency out. They don't have to, it puts the burden on the vendor and the legal system, so we don't have to worry about haphazardly having one department do this, another department do this, some being strict, some being lenient, all being afraid.
So does the vendor have to go to the court before it claims the trade secret? Or is it obligated after it claims the
I just said,
trade secret, it goes to the court?
Correct.
I mean,
Said that three times.
So
times.
I claim I have a trade secret, and now I have to go to the court.
That's correct. That's correct.
I'm obligated.
Yes.
Otherwise, I have to release the document.
That is correct.
And do you think this will apply to the fracking chemicals? Will those no longer be shielded by the trade secret law?
I'd have to look at that one, Mary Ellen. I haven't looked at it.
Does this create some sort of delay while the court is reviewing the request to deem it a trade secret?
Is there a delay?
Yeah, in disclosing the public record.
Yeah, that process, but I would phrase it differently. Some people are half full, some people are half empty. I think I know where you're at. I would phrase it differently. Does this speed up the process as it's currently in existence? Because the current existence has the process being forever, not happening. Do we speed up that process and have the opportunity for that trade secret to be public? Yes. It's a much better system. And then the third thing I want to talk about is we filed the lawsuit today against the City of Tampa, basically under the literal terminology of this is a unique way to get more revenue. They have engaged in an illegal tax. Basically, they've tacked on another $1.50 onto the bed tax, which is capped at 5%. They're maxed out at 5%. They are now going to charge another $1.50. It is collected, maintained, distributed. The language that they used for the ordinance is verbatim, basically our bed tax language. They have no authority to do that. Local and city governments can not raise a single tax outside of ad valorem. It's basically 100% a state jurisdiction. They'd have to come and get permission from the state, as they did to get the original bed tax and the cap at 5%. They didn't do that. They've called it a special assessment. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This is it looks like a tax. It spends like a tax. It's collected like a tax. It's absolutely a tax. So we're asking the court to nullify the tax. In addition to that, just to go around that process and get that all done, they basically created an interlocal agreement between three parties. Again, that's governed heavily by statute. If you're going to have a special taxing district, it's got to have certain provisions. If it doesn't have those certain provisions, then it's not a special taxing district. Those are to protect the taxpayers, have accountability and transparency rules, oversight by people who they have voted for and elected. None of that took place. They have basically created a special taxing district. This district has turned over operation of this tax and collection of this tax to a decades-old private entity. No agreement can be between a public and a private entity. It has to be between two public entities. To say that this is probably one of the most egregious spitting in the face of the Constitution that I've seen in my time in office is an understatement. So we've asked the judge, basically the same quo warranto suits that we've done in the past, that basically say, show us your authority. How in the world do you think you can get away with this? And we are very confident that we will win.
I have another Tampa question, and there's a lot of movement to raise potential new site moving to Tampa. In any way, shape, or form, do you think the team would be eligible for any state funding to make that move?
I think, I'm trying to think of how many times we've said no.
Well, I knew the answer. I was wondering if it was no or no.
No, I don't. And I think that's part of the problem here, though. This is government gone wild. So we want another stadium, and we want to pay for it with taxpayer money. And so we only have this 5% cap. So now we're going to take, and of that 5% cap already, 2% is paying for 3 existing stadiums. But now we want to bring another stadium in, and we need a bunch of money. So let's take the other 3%, which could have gone to other marketing or visit type enterprises. Let's take that 3% so we can bring in the other stadium. Well, now you got the people who are in the marketing business saying, well, hey, what happened to my slice of the pie? Don't worry about it. We'll create another fake tax, and we'll just call it a special assessment, and we'll all be happy. I mean, it's all predicated in many ways because of that greed and that avarice.
Speaker of that one instance of Tampa, are you stepping in now because you're worried about this spreading to the other?
I'm stepping in now because what makes America great? Why are you in this room having a press conference? Why do I get to stand in front of you and as a leader of elected leader of a government? Rule of law matters. The Constitution matters. You can't just spit in the face of the Constitution and expect a society to survive long term.
Are you watching any?
And it wouldn't surprise me, Gray, to your point, that if it gets away, to the whole broken windows theory, the first encroachment that we see that's a violation of accountability and transparency, yes, we've gone after people. The first one that we see where we think you're violating the Constitution, and sometimes they're folks that are friends and colleagues and people with R's after their name. We don't care. The Constitution matters. The rule of law matters. And would it be possible for government, as I said this is going all the way back to the designation speech, who's the problem? If there's a problem with local government, if there's a problem with state government, if there's a problem with the federal government, who is the source of that problem? It's the elected officials. We're the ones that are supposed to be the guardians at the gate. We're the ones who are supposed to know that rule of law and follow it. We're the ones who are supposed to have their best interests at heart, not our own selfish best interests. And so is it possible for elected officials out there to see this happen and then go out there and it spreads like wildfire? I guarantee that's a possibility.
On that vein, there's a plan, Representative Ralph wants to take some bed tax money and use it to fix some antiquated aging sewers in his district in South Brevard. Now, my interpretation of the law is, unless he's going to use those sewers to advertise tourism, but that's going to work. Is he allowed to do that? Is that
I'd have to look at their specific enactment, but I think we've had this fight with the bed tax, where I'm 100% in agreement with Representative Fine, is what is a better expenditure for a local government? Is it better to spend $500,000 on planting more trees in the local park? Is it better to spend $1 million so that we can get a new fleet of cars for our traveling roadside service? Or is it better to stop pumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of sewage into our waterways? I think that's a good question for local government to wrestle with. And you know what they hide behind? They hide behind the fact that that bed tax can only be spent for these purposes. I'm fine with giving local government in their lane. Here's all of your revenue sources. You can spend them how you want. And you know why? Because go to the Great Recession. Look at this, all of us in the state level. We had the time before the Great Recession, the time in the Great Recession, and the time coming out of the Great Recession. And we have a budget. What's our budget? $83 billion or $33 billion? What the local governments like to do is say that our budget's really only $33 billion. That's our general revenue. Since that's what we have blanket discretion over, that's what our budget is. They do it so take my county, a $1.5 billion budget. Do you know how much this is discretionary? Less than half a million. The other billion is unaccounted for. We can't touch any of that money. We can't touch that tourist tax money. So my county will spend it on, let's just try to build 18,000 sports fields because we got $18 million. Even though the ones that are currently in place aren't fully utilized. We got to spend it somehow on that thing. When they could be spending it, as in Randy's district, on cleaning up sludge and sewage going into our waterways. That makes no sense. So on the state level, when we hit the Great Recession, you know what we did? We begged, borrowed, and took from whatever, it didn't matter. Do we need to be building sky-rise affordable housing, or do we need to take that money and plug the holes in the budget now that we have a Great Recession and we've been hit hard? We made all those wise decisions, and we went back to the people and said, hold us accountable for those decisions. That's what local government should do. But you know what they do? Because of that conflict, they raise your taxes, in essence, every single year. So the state of Florida, going into the Great Recession, didn't raise one tax. In the heart of the Great Recession, and keep in mind, I want to speak for all of us, we didn't vote for any of this stuff. But some of my predecessor colleagues voted for some fee increases and a tax increase. Coming out of the Great Recession, when we all got elected, the first thing we did is took those fees and rolled them back. Take that exact same comparison. And we were able to do that because we go after the entire $83 billion budget. Local governments, whether it's the tourist development tax or other taxes, should be able to do the exact same thing and stop hiding behind the fact that that money is earmarked for these specific purposes. So you'll have a county that could literally be pumping toxic waste into water all day long because they don't have enough money in their utility fund or whatever it might be, but they're taking in from a penny for Brevard, a penny for Pasco, a penny for whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars statewide for land purchases. How is that even common sense? Randy is on to the exact thing he should be on. He should be a pit bull and go after it. And I support him 100%.
Can I ask you on Hurricane Coastal? Out of the House, there seemed to be the idea out of Chairman Trujillo, you got to build up reserves this year. Out of the Senate, you're hearing draw down reserves to try to help pay for some of the damage and some of the post-infrastructure stuff has to be done. Where do you see the House going this year? Yeah.
We are and have gone out, campaigned, knocked on doors, and told people that we're committed conservatives. All of us have. We've gone out there and we've said that we are going to govern exactly how we campaigned. There'll be no misrepresentation. What you see is what you get. We are conservatives. And we are the conservatives that are leading the chamber as a majority party.
So does that mean take some money?
Let me finish. Let me finish. It's a beautiful soliloquy. Give it a chance.
No, you're just warming up.
And so what we would say is, and I think that we're on a good path to work well with our counterparts in the Senate. But if you're asking where the House would be on that position, our position would be very clearly stated that where we are at reserves is a minimum number and certainly not something that we would tap into. And keep in mind, we have a AAA bond rating. And this is why. It makes no sense whatsoever. So you have a AAA bond rating. And that AAA bond rating says we have to be at 10%. And they allow us to be 10% of GR. Technically, we're not 10% of our entire budget, as I just said. We're only 10% of GR. But because of that, we have a AAA bond rating. And we have rankings of #1 in fiscal health. The second that we jeopardize that and allow those reserves to be dipped into for a non-emergency purpose, nothing out there it warrants us going into those reserves. What we're really talking about is, can I have my pork barrel projects and get it from reserves and pay for from those reserves for IRMA stuff? No, the responsible thing to do is pay for those things out of the pork barrel projects. And the reason for that is because if we drop and that bond rating goes down to AA, the cost to the state of Florida is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $500 million. That doesn't even, that math doesn't even add up. So yeah, reserves, and what Chairman Trujillo said is absolutely correct. We are going to maintain a healthy reserves. That's why last year, for the first time, we didn't only just do $1.2 billion in reserves, which was one of the highest numbers ever. We made $200 million of it as recurring. What I'd like to see, and what I think these guys would like to see long term, is to have that recurring reserves in the base. Then you don't have to sit there every single year and say, we've got to put another billion in non-recurring, another billion in non-recurring. Have that be a recurring number, and then to the extent that you can put more non-recurring in there so your out years look great, then that's even more beneficial. But dipping into those reserves, not only will it cost us more money, but our out years look ridiculous.
Now, are you disappointed that you're seeing 40-plus projects already put in from your members?
No, this is what I say. I say it to my own members. I say it to our colleagues. All of us. Wow. See, somebody really wants a project. Oh, it's President Scott. Come on, man. Ruining my press conference. No, members, all of them, same with senators. They represent 500,000 people, give or take. We represent almost, 175, 200,000 people, give or take. And so you have that right. You're a member. You're elected. You represent a segment of the state. Go out there and ask for whatever you think is beneficial to your community. But absolutely, whether it's the Randy Fine issue on the local level or the same thing on the state level, what's more important? That we take care of our transportation needs and the long lines that happened during Hurricane Irma, that we have better understanding of where our gas supplies are, that our power outages are shorter and less people are affected, or $500,000 for new paddles at a rowing center in some part of the state.
If I could clarify real quickly the lawsuit. So one, will you give a copy of the lawsuit?
It's attached, yeah. It's,
Okay.
Emily, do we have our copies of the lawsuit down here?
So, because I just want to understand
What's that?
clarification on what's illegal and what's not illegal. But are you doing this primarily because of your concern about the legality of the issue, or are you doing this because you do view this as a backdoor way to get financing for the Rays Stadium?
No, it's absolutely, as I answered to Gray, first and foremost, we all raised our hand and said we would uphold the Constitution. Rule of law matters, first and foremost. Secondarily, the thought process, there needs to be, and I say it all the time, all of us need to stay in our lanes. We have 3 branches, we have 3 levels. All of us stay in our lanes, good things happen. And when you get outside those lanes, behavior becomes that egregious. It becomes so egregious that you're literally, all my phrases have curse words, so I gotta.
Can I get you to explain, you talk about egregious behavior and staying in your lanes. There are a lot of private contracts that the state engages in that have a lot of questions about them. And I'm wondering when you're going to apply the same amount of scrutiny, for example, in the contracts within the criminal justice system. There have been a number of audits that have said that some of these private prison providers are extorting money from the state by saying they're providing services that aren't there. We have written about the private providers for the residential juvenile detention facilities that are doing things there that have no oversight and are not being monitored by the agency in charge. Where is your, what's next? And do you think there is room for similar scrutiny that you're applying to the local governments, for state governments?
We already have. Again, the whole reason that we're having this press conference is because we're doing something and filing legislation that applies to local governments that's already been enacted into law in state governments. So we already did that. Didn't ask that. Where do these questions come from? I don't understand that. Nobody. Did anyone say that we're not changing anything? I don't know where that question comes from. No, let's have a conversation on the facts.
Okay.
Let's have a conversation on what you asked. So I just answered. One is we did it on the state level already, to your point. Second of all, name me, Mary Ellen, some other biennium of a legislature, anybody, name me who has taken on more state agencies and sued more state agencies and including other branches than this body. We have. The question that you're asking is how much resources do we have to go and do all of these things. Hopefully, now we're looking at doing 2 additional things. We're talking about trying to have an internal office of abuse and waste in the legislature, because all these letters that we send to the local government, all these contracts that we send, they all, they don't cooperate in a meaningful way. So you get boxes and boxes. Now we got to have people go through these things. So we've got to get more manpower to go through all of this stuff. All of these contracts, we have to have that. Second of all, we are looking at encouraging more of this. Ever since we started doing this, you know what? Now they view the legislature as the Pied Piper of waste and abuse. So a week doesn't go by that we don't get some government official, local, state, or federal, who calls us and says, you need to be looking at this. Every week we get one of those calls. Every single week. Someone, I don't want to name them because we haven't looked at them yet, and I don't want to impugn anyone's character, but then it's like, okay, and we call and we say to staff, now we need to look into this. Someone says this. So now we're looking at, is there a way to have take the whistleblower statute and apply it to waste? Not just for government fraud. Maybe we could have a whistleblower statute for waste, and now we'd have more of these government officials and employees come out and say, to that point, here's exactly what we did at this prison, Juvenile Justice Center, Department of Lottery, Department of Education, and we'll continue to do that.
With all due respect, sir, I think what Mary Ellen is getting at is the fact that there are a series of audits, and then there are a series of newspaper reports, and these things that come out in the way that they come out by press and everything like that are not discussed in the legislature. The audit that dealt with DEM, where there was an audit earlier this year that faulted them for their emergency planning, that was not an audit that, as far as I know, was ever discussed by the legislature. There's IG reports, there's audits that are coming out on a constant basis, but they never seem to be reviewed. And so the question is, are you being selective with your oversight as something that helps with the political agenda, as opposed to being overall concerned about all the operations of state government?
No, I think that we have been as zealous, as I've said earlier, or more zealous than any other biennium in going out there and ferreting out corruption and graft, and we'll continue to do that. And we do look at those, Gary. Members look at them. They are discussed. Those are blanket statements that are absolutes and aren't true. But it's been nice seeing you guys. Thanks.